Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. Welcome to the Westworld pre-show for the finale of Westworld Season 2. If you're watching live, apologies for the delay in coming to you. It's entirely my fault. My car broke down, so I've had a little bit of trouble getting here. So and why don't we start by just introducing my guests, because I've got three fantastic guests on today. Let's start with Vanessa. Hi, Vanessa. Do you want to say hello to everyone?
Hi, everybody. I'm Vanessa. I write for WestworldWatchers.com and Watchers on the Wall for you Game of Thrones fans. And I do art as well, so you can check that out at vkcultart.com. Glad to be here. Can't wait to talk about the finale.
I'm Vanessa. I write for...
Fantastic. And Justin, how about you?
What's going on, everybody? Happy to be here. Of course, you can find me at the Justin Thomas Show, and just really excited for tonight's episode. Thanks for having me.
And finally, Hax Dogma. How are you doing?
Hey, everybody. I'm doing good, man. Thank you so much for having me on. And for those that don't know me, Hax Dogma, and you can look me up on YouTube or Twitter. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Well, we're going to start, as we always do, with a look back at last time. As always, if there are any super chats, then we'll come to them straight away, but keep the questions coming in the chat. But guys, who wants to start? Let's start with Hax. What's your overall thoughts about the last episode?
Man, I mean, so looking back at last week's episode, correct? So yes, I think, I don't know. I mean, I really, really did enjoy it. I think it was one of the better episodes in the fact that it was kind of just revealing information. You know, it was kind of building the persona of William that's kind of been, you know, is he good? Is he bad? Is he, you know, what are his motivations? And I like what they're doing. And I hope that they don't sacrifice what they're doing by making him a host this entire time, because what they're showing is a very human person, you know, a very human thing in the fact that, you know, he has paranoid tendencies, he has delusions and you know, a human condition. So the fact of him being at this park and the, you know, extravagant nature of what it is, him being a host, I think we kind of lose something from that. So I really like this episode because it does define humanity in this park and how, you know, how insane it could be and the abuse of this park and what it can lead to.
Absolutely. And Justin, how about you? What were your overall thoughts?
I didn't like it as much on my first watch. I did get a quick second watch, and I started to like it a lot more. I agree with what Hax said about how much this could really affect somebody, and maybe we have a little bit of an inside look into why you can only spend 28 days in this park is because you just will go mad. But I think the issues they dealt with were pretty heavy, and I think they dealt with them in great ways, and it left a lot of questions for the season finale tonight. So overall, pretty good.
And finally, Vanessa, over to you. What were your overall thoughts? We'll get into the detail in just a moment. What were your overall thoughts about episode 9?
Yeah, I actually really liked it. I thought it was kind of brutal to watch, and I was actually pretty shocked to see Emily killed. So, but I think it was... I agree with you, Hax. Like, I will be really upset if it turns out William is a host, because I think, you know, he wanted real stakes and he's gotten them now. And I think all of that kind of goes out the window if he's not human. So fingers crossed that doesn't turn out to be the case.
I think I would agree with everyone. So I think he is human. I think that we'll probably find that out quite early on in the next episode. But I think that it's important personally for the plot that he is human, because if he's just a robot, if he's a host, for me, that takes away a little bit of the human element of it. It makes this a story about the hosts, whereas I want this to be a story about both hosts and humans. And his dilemma is the wrong way of saying it, but his journey is very much a human journey. But there was a lot of questions, and Vanessa, perhaps I'll come to you first on this one, as you mentioned it, about Emily. And there are a lot of people said, that might not have actually been human Emily. That might have actually been a host Emily. What do you make of that? Do you think it actually was real Emily?
I think it's real Emily. I can see why people might not, but I want it to be, like I said, I want it to be real stakes. I mean, this is what he's been asking for the whole time. I don't think he quite meant that, but he needs to see real consequences for his actions. And, you know, killing hosts hasn't given him that, because he just sees them pop right back up again when they get repaired. And even though, you know, they may not that may not happen now to the host. They don't mean anything to him. They're just things to him. And seeing a consequence of his behavior and actually his daughter's death. I mean, he can deflect blame for his wife all he wants, but he's completely responsible for this, and he needs to face that. And so I think she needs to be real as well for it to mean anything. But yeah, I mean, it's possible she's the host. I don't really like that theory.
No, neither do I have to say. Guys, do either of you think that it wasn't actually her? Do either of you think that she was actually a host?
So I think, I don't know. I mean, there's always the idea of who we're seeing the story being told from. So like the most revealing part of this, in my opinion, was when William, when we see William after the fact and he's like, oh my God, I actually just did this, and wants to take his own life because he's so grief stricken. I think that he was so convinced that she was a host, and for him to have killed her, he would most certainly have to have checked, cut into her arm after the fact and said, okay, there is a hard line, or he cut in and found that there wasn't a hard line, because he pulls up the little card. There's no way he would just go, oh, wow, that's it. He would need more proof. He would need to validate his, oh my God, is this my real daughter? And maybe try to resuscitate her, and then once he can't, then realize that I need to know for certain and cut into her body. I think that would realistically be the only way to do it, or perhaps the fact that the scanner still doesn't have an answer yet, and we as an audience don't view it. But I think it's all from the perspective, because if William does become a host and that was the real human, it's up in the air. I think what we're supposed to feel from that scene, though, and the importance of that scene, is the confusion of it, is the matrix of variables and the yes or no questions that can't possibly be answered, because that is what William is suffering from. He doesn't know, and we don't know if he doesn't know because he's a host, or if because he's just a regular human going through very human things. So I think that's really the importance of the scene, and if she is a host, I'll be shocked as well.
Yeah, I'd agree. Do you anything else on that, Justin?
Yeah, I think those are all good points. I think the show is playing a really good game of, are they a host or aren't they a host? They're leaving it ambiguous on purpose. And we see the man in black struggling with this fear, I believe, that we always see him checking his right arm, and not truly looking like he's afraid to go get a test for a disease or something. Mm-hmm. So I think we see him going from being afraid of being a host to, after he commits this terrible deed of killing his own daughter and probably finding out, again, we don't know for sure, that she is not a host, of hoping that he's a host. So those decisions are all Ford's and not his own. I think we see, we're seeing his madness in a way. I think that he wants to be relieved of the grief, if it's all Ford's plan per se.
Excellent. I think I would agree. There's just one final point I would make on that, which was about the scanner. Now, the scanner thing that they put to the back of both of their heads, the first point that a number of people came out, we didn't actually see what it said for Emily, but the assumption on the reactions from the Delos people was that it came out negative for her being a host. But the second thing to say about that was that it didn't actually, other people have pointed, it didn't actually say this person is a host or that person's not a host. What it did was it was a test for the little explosive thing in their vertebrae. So that's what it was. And if they happened to be a host without one of them, for example, then that might not show up. But I think I would agree. I think both the man in black and Emily, they were both human, and I think that this is a huge tragedy. What we saw going all the way through this episode was just a huge family tragedy, and I want to bring in a couple of the other parts of that family in just one moment. But we had a very generous super chat. Lost for words. Thank you so much. £50, incredibly generous. Thank you. In appreciation of all four of you, the Westworld for their Westworld appetizers. Once the dust settles, Sunday nights and Monday mornings just won't be the same without you. Thank you so much. I have to say, and I should have probably said at the beginning, I've really enjoyed having these guys on over the last few weeks. What I'm hoping to do, I haven't spoken to them individually about this, is to do one more of these at some point after the end of the season, perhaps say something like Tuesday night or something like that, just to round the season up. But this is the last of the pre-shows, and I just want to give my personal thanks to all three of these guys and a couple of other people. We had Axelon, and just before the season we had AU Packmule, so I'd like to thank them as well. But it's been amazing having you guys on, so thank you. Let's move on to, as I said, I wanted to talk about the other members of the family, because I view this as very much a long family tragedy we saw played out over an hour or so. Let's look at Juliet, the wife figure. How do we see her differently now? Because we had sort of hints of what happened to her. We had sort of the Man in Black and Emily talking about her. How do we see her differently, and how does that make us understand the story differently now that we've seen this episode? Justin, perhaps you want to start on that one.
Well, we see that she was, pretty unstable throughout. We see that she is dealing with addiction problems, and she's not this person that is exactly the most reliable or stable person. And I think they dealt with the reality of being an addict and how addicts, go from anger to fear very realistically. And it shows us how people remember things much differently than the host. We see how the Man in Black described the story to Teddy over the campfire in season 1, kind of being a little bit different than how it actually panned out, which is it's a good way to look at things, since the hosts don't have the ability to form things in their mind to make it more advantageous for them. We kind of remember things how we choose to remember them. And, we see that it was a struggle for everybody, not only for the Man in Black, but also for Emily and, of course, Juliet. And this wasn't something that was just out of the blue. This is something that had been going on. So I think it took it from it being this very, very shocking, surprising, thing to being something that, yes, is very shocking and very sad, but it was after a series of traumatic events. This wasn't her first breakdown. And we learned that she married William for the William that we saw in season 1 before he turned Black Hat. And every time that he achieved something or was able to give more money to charity, just turned him into the man that she didn't want to be married to. I guess if you were raised, within a rich family, the biggest fear might be having somebody marry you for your name. And so every achievement William makes is almost like a slight to her, is the way I saw it. I think it took an interesting twist on it.
Yeah, Vanessa, what about you? What do you think? What do you think we learned about Juliet that was something new for the story?
Yeah, I kind of agree with what you said, Justin. Like, I think she probably feels like, he never really loved her. She thought he did. She thought he was different. And it turns out he just used her to climb the ladder and hid his true self from her for all those years. And it's got to be really isolating and lonely to feel that you're with someone that doesn't care about you, and to not have realized that for so long, to get to the point where you feel like, well, it's too late now. What can I do? And then just having all of her fears confirmed by finding that card and realizing that she's married to a monster that just fooled the entire world about who he really is. So, it makes it a lot more understandable why she felt she had no other place to turn, especially her thinking that her daughter was on her father's side and, was against her as well. So I feel like it's had to be crushing for her. I mean, her whole family got destroyed basically. And, the person that she thought she loves, the one that did it. So it had to be a crushing realization.
Yeah, agreed. Hax, how about you? So the character of Juliet, I personally, when I was watching, saw her in a completely different way when we saw that she had this struggle with alcohol that seemed to be quite a long running thing going on, and that added a whole new layer to what the Man in Black was going through, as well as the whole family. What did you think?
Yeah, so I agree with the majority of the points, I believe. So the one thing I really want to elaborate on is like the upbringing of William. From what we know, he came from humble beginnings, similar to Ford, and we know Ford, was able to relate to that and even cited his own family abuse. So I really think that, they state that William's, dark side or his stain or his dark passenger is kind of been there, and it just over time and maybe visiting the park, it was worn away. I think this entire time I wanted William to be the good guy. Truthfully, just wanted him to, at the end of the day, justify everything that he was doing, and there be a reason for everything bad that we saw. But I mean, with what we learn, I'm pretty positive it's just as straightforward as he is the bad guy, and he manipulated the family, and Juliet's problems are the there's an overall theme of family addiction. Even James Delos was called an adulterer by William. So the family had issues, but her drinking, in my opinion, was always just the causation of William. Her brother died, and then the idea that right before he left, he probably left with the message of, hey, don't trust William. I'm telling you the truth. Similar to how Juliet did the same thing right before she took her own life and left the profile for her daughter. So I think what we're not seeing is how much Logan didn't want, or tried to fight William, and the alcoholism that we see in Juliet is the product of that. Is, oh my God, it's not only William's responsibility, or it wasn't only William that did this. It was my fault as well. And overall, I think that's what took her to take her own life.
Yeah, I agree. I think with all of that, I found it actually quite. I'd use the word tragic a lot, but I found the whole thing incredibly tragic, because there clearly was a sort of a predilection towards substance abuse of some kind running through that family, with how they dealt with things that they felt that they could not control. There was Logan, which I'd actually like to quickly talk about Logan in a moment, but there was Logan, and then there was Juliet, and then obviously what we've seen from Emily isn't so much sort of substance abuse, but there certainly was inherited both from her mother's side and also from her father, a very focused and very driven personality, trying to get what she was wanting and what she was going for. Now, in terms of the final part of this little family group, we've got Logan. There was a few hints here, and I think we will see Logan again next episode to draw a little bit more of this out. But there are a few hints here about this missing bit in his story we've got. So as far as we can tell, we know that he went into the park that we saw in season 1, and then he seemed to get pushed out a little bit by William, and then descend into alcoholism, substance abuse. And he seemed very aware of what was going on, and he was like raising a toast to enjoy your immortality, enjoy your living forever. And that the next thing we hear is that he overdosed. The presumption is he died. So is the implication, and perhaps Vanessa, that you could pick this one up, is the implication therefore that he understood what was really going on? He knew what was really going on. He was one of the very few people who understood the whole project, and he rejected it, but he was just ignored. Is that what we think is going on with him?
Yeah, I would agree with that. It sure sounded like he was aware of what they were trying to do when we see him in that pool scene. And that's, I think that plus what he endured in the park with William being, shoved aside and probably rejected. It looks like he was rejected by his father. We see that brief clip of James Delos walking away from him in the teaser. So, to be kind of at the top of the food chain for so long, and being in charge of the company, as for what that's worth, because I know James wasn't really involved with him going out and finding the investments. He kind of left that to Logan. So, being that high up and then kind of falling all the way down, he probably felt like, I've got nothing left in my life to live for, so I'm going to numb the pain with whatever I can. So it was really sad to see. I know he was definitely not a nice person in season 1, but I always felt a little bit of pity for him, especially after what happened with William. And it really kind of hit home this season, seeing how far he fell. And I think we'll see a bit more into his story next episode, and hopefully some redemption for him, fingers crossed. So I'm looking forward to see what happens with him tonight.
That's same here. And I want to come back to the Man in Black, because I think that this this is clearly his important arc. And Hax, what you were saying about him looking like he is the bad guy, certainly the first half of his arc, the William bit, seems to be this descent down into darkness. And then in season 2, we see, if not a redemption arc, then certainly some sort of contrition or recognition that what he did wasn't so good. Whether that counts as an arc that's quite as catchy as a redemption arc, I don't know, but that seems to be what's going on in season 2. So I want to come back to that in just one second, because I'd like to pick up on someone else who always comes into these conversations and always seems to be the same question. Ford appears here partway through this, and he's the person who sort of skids down there and hears the information that they've got collected on you. What does that make you think? The clear implication is that he thinks that the man in black, that William might be in the mood for a change of mind. How much control do you think Ford had over what was going on? It was very clear this was a rare trip out of the park. This was a one-off. William wasn't expecting to see him there, and so Ford had chosen his moment to come out of the park and actually give this bit of information. How in control of what happened there do you think Ford was? And let's go to Justin first on this one.
There's a lot left to be seen on that. I would like to believe that he is trying to help William in a way. I don't believe that he was trying to completely sabotage his life, and that might have just happened. It just ended up going that way. But clearly he needed to quite literally throw in William's face who he truly was at this event where William was being honored. So that's all I think we can take away from that until we see what happens tonight, is that Ford truly, like I said, in the most literal way, needed to, lay down some evidence for the other side of him and make him truly look at who he is. For what reason? I can't really speculate on that right now.
Well, Hax, perhaps. I mean, I know you're a big fan of speculating, so let's go with this one. My working theory is that when Ford did his great speech at the end of season 1, just before getting shot, and he says, I did a video on this, he said, and then I realized someone was paying attention, someone who could change. I think he was talking about William, the man in black, and I think that this was the moment when he'd seen that he could change and was starting to do something. How much, therefore, do you think Ford was either trying to influence what was going on with William, and how much do you think he succeeded in doing that?
So firstly, that is a really, really cool idea. I like the idea of the unknown body that they were talking about not being whoever I previously cited as Akecheta, and his upbringing of kind of watching for it, as they stated in the scene previous, but in fact being William. That is really interesting. The idea of that scene. I'm sorry, we're talking about when he slides the key card, correct?
That's the one, yeah.
So I know that it's not popular to think that Ford wanted Juliet to die or intended that, but if you go back and watch the scene, he says, William chuckles, what is Oz doing without its wizard? And then he says, I merely came to pay my respects. Well, I don't think I've ever used the term pay my respects to be anything other than, to represent when someone passes away. And then he just happens to slide the card that causes his wife to kill herself. I don't know. And it may be intentional. It may not be. I don't think we have a reason to believe that he was maliciously doing it yet, unless it served a greater purpose that we find out in this episode. I don't know. I think, I think it's really interesting, the word choice and the action overall. So I could see it.
Sure. And Vanessa, how do you think Ford fits into this episode? Because I see Ford in charge of everything sometimes. Yeah. But I mean, could he really have some role in this one?
I have a little bit more of a pessimistic view of Ford, I guess. We see numerous times in the series that he really hates humanity. He tells Bernard over and over not to trust Elsie, who actually is a pretty decent human being compared to most of the people that we see on the show. but he, he just thinks humanity is, it can't evolve any further than it already has. Like, humanity's done. I think he even says that in one of the episodes last season about there's no further humanity can go, but the hosts have the ability to change and grow and become something more. And I got some audio from a Q&A that Nolan and Joy did. I'm not going to say anything spoilery, but it was at the finale screening, and Lisa Joy said something about how humanity, we're stuck in our own little loops, and we seem to, even though there are periods of peace and prosperity, we always seem to turn back to violence. And so that, they wanted to be realistic and portraying the harsh realities of our world on the show. And I think that's Ford's view, is like, no matter how far humanity progresses, it's always going to, go bad somehow. Something is always going to go wrong, because the very heart of humanity is, something dark, like, like a stain, like William. And so I can't see him looking at William and seeing all of his actions in the park over decades and thinking that he has the ability to change. And maybe that's not true, but I find it hard to believe that he's pushing him toward redemption. I think it's more of a way to manipulate him one final time. But we'll see.
If I can jump in real fast, I do agree there wholeheartedly. But this entire time, it seems like if you look at the interactions between Ford and William, it always seems like there's a playful banter. We have to assume that off screen they've done a lot of business and have come to agreements about the park and stuff. So they've had a significant amount of interactions. So yeah, I don't know. I just think that. I'm not sure where I was going with that. Sorry.
Well, I think we need to look at how advantageous it would be for Ford to have William go and rampage, as we've seen him do, which I guess in his overall plan to bring the host, full circle, is pretty important. So maybe there is some credence to him wanting to move along this phase of rampaging per se with William. Is this the way he did it? Was this so diabolical and planned out? Like, Ford seems to be the chess master. Again, I mean, like I said, I don't really think I can honestly speculate on it, but that if I have to, that's what I would say, is that, it is advantageous for his overall plan for William to rampage, in which he did.
Yeah. I have some thoughts about that regarding the Forge, but we can table it and talk about it when we get to this next episode. Sure.
Let's park most of the talk about the Forge until the next episode discussion. My thoughts on what Ford was doing there is, I think that they were trying to draw the line between what happened in just before season 2 and what happened in season 2, in the sense that at the end of that conversation, Ford says something, and I forget the exact line, but it's something along the lines of perhaps one more game or something like that, which was kind of teeing up this idea that he had this idea of the door, that he was wanting to have this game for William to be playing, and the game that he is putting William through, it's a little bit vague and it's a little bit unclear, but it's one thing that is very clear is that, well, two things I think are very clear, is that first of all, it is trying to confront him with things from his past that he has done wrong, and give him opportunities to try and see whether he could do them slightly differently this time. So, for example, when he went to Lawrence's hometown, and this time he was there facing people who were rampaging and killing and doing all sorts of bad things, and previously it'd been him who'd been doing that, and so it was a switched role, and it was a chance for him to be the liberator of that town. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that it does seem to be leading towards the door. It does seem to be leading towards the Valley Beyond, and William's very much got this idea in mind that he wants to be destroying stuff. So that seemed to me that was trying to tee that up. I don't think that Ford knew exactly what was going to be happening. Obviously he couldn't control what happened with Juliet and all the rest of it, but I think that he could sense from, as Hax said, I think they'd had lots of chats over the years, and they understood each other really quite well, that he was now at a point where he could perhaps start to change. And I think that was why he came out and actually tried to present him with the evidence of who he was, not what was going on with the thing that he created, but who he was as a human being, because that was very hard for him to deny. Okay, so we've got this whole arc here with the Man in Black. Does anyone want to pick up then, before we move on to the other aspects of this episode, where, well, okay, we'll go to the obvious question: is the Man in Black himself a host? And if, as I assume, or that's my working assumption, he isn't, what does that actually do to his psychology? Once he discovers that he is actually human, what does that do? Who wants to, Vanessa, what about you?
You know, I think, well, it's going to be devastating for one, because, you know, he'll have shot his human daughter, being a human and being in his own control of his own actions and not being forced by Ford or whoever. But two, I think, you know, if he realizes that, and at this point, you know, he already came to the park thinking he was never going to leave, and now he really has nothing to lose. You know, his family's gone. I mean, there really isn't anything left for him, and he was already planning on destroying everything. So I feel like he's just going to be like, all right, let's burn this thing down. You know, I mean, what else is there for him to do now? You know, I guess maybe the only way he could really redeem himself is to try and help these hosts that for so long he viewed as nothing more than things, and tortured and abused for so long. And maybe finally he'll see some humanity in them and want to help them survive. So we'll see.
Hax, anything to add to that? Where do you think psychologically the Man in Black is now, and where do you think that I think we're in agreement that he probably is human, or we want him to be human. What do you think the fact when he discovers that he will then want to be or do or become?
Well, firstly, it's important to kind of think about how he would discover that, right? So like right now, what we see him doing is digging into his arm. But even if he digs to the bare bone of his arm looking for that hard line, he'll never find it, because he's either being programmed not to see things that will hurt him, or he's a human. So, you know, there's that whole, it's the ex machina moment. I think that overall for William's character, I do think he's human. The idea that Ford has stated that they haven't gotten to that point yet kind of means something. And I think that, you know, Emily stating that she wants to make him suffer. And originally I thought that was, you know, putting him in the James Delos, or I'm sorry, mapping his mind and putting him through the same simulation that James Delos was going through continuously, because that in and of itself would be maddening. But now that he has killed his daughter, he is feeling actual things. Well, what if he does become the first host to survive, or does get, or I'm sorry, first human mind to be mapped to a host, and then has to just permanently live with the fact that that happened? I mean, that would be the most, I mean, he would be in a prison. You know, he would not be bleeding out on the side of the dirt trail until he dies. He would be experiencing something worse than that, you know, not being able to die, or unless he took his own life, of course. But you know, I don't know. I think the idea that we haven't seen the first integration yet, as Ford stated, is interesting. And the term long-term viable host has always stuck in my head this entire season. So I think that's what we're pushing for, is at some point we might see the first human mind to exist in a host body. And if it does become William, then it kind of wraps together these strings of, you know, Emily wants him to suffer. They haven't gotten to it yet. And I think might make a good story. But if they don't, and he's just a human, then I also really like that.
Sure. And Justin, did you have any thoughts on where psychologically the Man in Black is now?
I think it's just posing the same question this series has been posing the entire time: predestination versus free will, the benefits of both. The predestination, of course, of the host that Ford brings up in season 1 about how they have the benefit of not having to live with their decisions and whatnot, and how he relieves them of that. And then also, you know, the benefits and all the pros and cons of free will, that, you know, yes, you make your own decisions, but then you have to live with those decisions. So like I said, I believe that he went from being worried he was a robot, or a host, excuse me, so much that he killed his own daughter. And now he's probably in a mindset where he's hoping that he is a host, because that means he's relieved of any responsibility or absolved of any responsibility. That's the way I take it, is that it's just simply predestination versus free will, and which one is more advantageous for the human race.
Well, see, is that correct though? Because the scene with the scene with Ford and Bernard, in which he states, what is that mark? What is that? Are my feelings real? And he's like, yeah, I mean, this is the question that drove Arnold to take his own life. They are real. You are feeling this. So yeah, I mean, I think William will, if he does become a host, then he'll still be feeling it. It's not like, I mean, it may be predestined by Ford, and like he was supposed to do that, but and in that sense, he is relieved of it being his choice to take her life. But I think he would still be stuck with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I agree. And trust me, I don't want him to be a host, but I just think that's the question that the series is posing as a whole. So, I mean, it's just what you have to come to in your own mind, how you feel about that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I think that's a really interesting discussion. I think that for me, where he is psychologically, assuming he finds he's human, is ties in with a question. Actually, one of my patrons, Jeff Burst, in the chat. Hi, Jeff. Good to see you. Says, do we think that William is planning to go down with the ship? So this, I think, is very interesting, because the question. I don't think he wants to live forever. I think that he is quite happy now to just do, his mind is focused on what he wants to do, is get rid of the bad things that he's done as some kind of recompense. And I think that he's not really thought beyond that, Jeff. I don't think he's really thought, do I want to die or not want to die? He nearly killed himself and then decided not to, because he wanted to find out whether he was human or a host. I think that he doesn't mind at this moment. I don't think that he's planning to kill himself. I think that he's not really thinking about it. I think he's thinking about the task in hand, and we'll get onto it a little bit when we're looking forward to the next episode, because I think that very focused approach to what he's trying to achieve will allow him to work with people that he might otherwise not easily be able to work with. But I want to move on now to some of the other characters, because although this was really quite focused in on the Man in Black, there was a lot of plot development with the other characters as we went along. So let's first of all look at what happened with Clementine. Poor Clementine. We seem to be feeling sorry for her every single time. So they extracted today, being Delos, the Delos technician, whose name I don't even know, but seems to be actually quite good at his job. He extracted the bits of code from Maeve that give her superpowers and put them into Clementine. How he managed to do this so quickly and efficiently with everything that seems to be going around him, I do not know. But then this seems to give Clementine the ability to make hosts turn on each other, or she could make them do other things, but she can make them turn on each other, and he can control the Clementine, and so she is now effectively weaponized. I don't want to get too much into what's going to happen in the next episode, but Vanessa, perhaps, is there anything you want to add to that other than the obvious poor Clementine?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what else there is to add about that. I'm curious to see, obviously it looks like Maeve's going to get out and she's still got her same ability to control other hosts that aren't awake, it seems like. So who's more powerful, I guess, is the question. And the thing I'm concerned about is that Maeve will end up having to kill Clementine or watch her die in order to stop her. So that's going to be really, really emotional, I think, if that's what happens.
I agree completely. I think that this is suddenly we get a changed power dynamic. It was quite a quick scene, and it was interestingly, and this may become important in episode 10. Bernard saw it, so he knows what's going on there. But we've had this power imbalance all the way through this season, where Maeve can just go around and effectively do what she wants. Even when she's there being strapped down to the table, she's communicating across many miles with other hosts. And so she's got all this power, and so Delos are always on the back foot, and then suddenly this means that Delos have got something that they can take the battle to the hosts. So this, I think, is I think it's not too far short to say that it is a game changer in terms of having a battle, because they're not just going in with guys with guns, which seems to have been what their plan has been so far. But let's move on to Maeve, as we've started talking about Maeve and the conversation between her and Ford, because Ford then took Bernard down and said, I've done a pre-recorded message for Maeve. Can you just come a little bit closer, and then I'll pass it on, then we can go. And then we had a really quite touching moment when Ford was talking to Maeve. Hax, do you want to start on this one? What's your take on that? Because Ford basically said, "You're my favorite. I treat you like a daughter." What did you make of that?
So, one, I think probably one of the most touching and beautiful moments of the entire series. I don't know. I mean, it kind of attests to the fact, like, I think a lot of people have in their mind that Ford kind of wasn't the genius programmer, and it was kind of just, Arnold doing all the work. But with these lines, we have, the confirmation that he created a host, and that even more so that Maeve was the favorite. I think it was just a really touching scene. The biggest thing that really stood out for me was the core permissions and why they needed to be unlocked, and how they got locked to begin with. Was that the engineer that off screen did that? And if so, I mean, how couldn't she unlock them the entire time? And something is also off with the door. Like, he was able to authenticate to the research group badge reader, or I'm sorry, DNA scanner. But then on this DNA scanner, which is inside the Mesa, which he would have admin access to because he was the head of behavior, Bernard wasn't able to access anything. So I think there's also something with that's interesting. Overall, for the interaction between Maeve and between Ford, I just think it was a really touching moment.
Agreed. And what do you think about that, Justin?
I think it's interesting that we get to see that Bernard, Arnold, wasn't the only one that had a favorite, with Dolores, that Ford also had this attachment with Maeve, and that adds another layer to Ford that makes him a little bit more, sympathetic to the viewer. I thought that was a nice move. Also, the unlocking of the core permissions, maybe that could be something to do with how maybe now she's able to control the woke hosts, for lack of a better word. I don't know exactly what that entails, but if Clementine has the same exact power Maeve did have, then we have to assume that Ford has somehow leveraged the battle in Maeve's control to make it more advantageous for her. But yeah, I thought it was beautiful. I like to see that he's attached just as Arnold was, because before we saw no semblance of that whatsoever.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I would add on to this one was, and I don't think this was a coincidence that this was aired on Father's Day, that there was a huge amount of comparison between what happened with the man in black and his daughter, and then Maeve, who stayed around for love of her daughter, and Ford, who effectively said that he treats Maeve as his daughter. And so there was this comparison between what love has meant to these different people and what it has driven them to do. So I would agree. I found that an incredibly moving moment, and I think that we now should probably start to see that each of those three main hosts, being Maeve and Dolores and Bernard, have got some relationship in some way, whether they knew it or not, with one of the two creators, being Ford and Arnold. So Maeve wasn't just a random person they picked on later, that she was somebody that Ford knew about and cared about for a long time. And just picking up on those core permissions, Hax, I'll just quickly come to you with a sort of your techie hat on. Do we think that this is just giving her back the power she had, that presumably Delos switched off, or do we think that there's something more here? So Justin was saying about there being perhaps this is giving her control over the woke hosts, for want of a better phrase. Do you think that there are more powers still to come from Maeve?
So I think what we know from this, and it's confirmed, is that Ford wanted her to get out of the park without any limitation, without anyone following her, and she's had these powers. She's had powers defined as access to the mesh network and knowledge of the backdoors in which Arnold and Ford programmed previously. I think that no, I don't think that there's any more that she could have, because if there was things that she could have, then Ford would have already gave her, set her up on the way out the door originally, with that being his plan. In my opinion, I think that there's probably not. It's still left open. It could very much be. The idea of a core permission, or in terms of like Linux system administration, it would be like a root account. And with root accounts, you have more access to everything. But I don't know. I just don't think that. Chris Cole actually brings up a good point. With a core permission or a root account, you have the ability to reprogram yourself, and I do think that could possibly be it. That is interesting, but if it's not that, then I don't really see it being anything else.
Okay, fair enough. Let's move on. We've got a lot to get through, and I'm aware we started a little bit late for people who are watching live. So let's get on to Bernard. And there were, I think, I counted at least 3 significant things which happened with Bernard this episode, even though he wasn't in it huge amounts. The first one was that he got rid of Ford. Now, Vanessa, I'll come to you on this one. He went in there, he jacked into himself, he found the Ford virus or whatever it was and deleted it. So do we think that he has actually got rid of Ford, and do we think this is the end of Ford, or is Ford hiding somewhere else? What's actually going on there?
I don't think he actually got rid of him. And so we see a brief scene in the teaser where Bernard is asking Ford to help him, and it's not in that letterbox aspect ratio that we see inside of the cradle or the forge, so it's not a simulation. So how else would he be asking him for help? I feel like he's still in there. And then I remember seeing on Reddit, someone had a screenshot of the tablet, and you could actually see a piece of code with FRD, and it's still there after he deleted the package. So I feel like Ford is still hidden in there, and he's just choosing to let Bernard think he's gone.
Okay. Justin, have you got any thoughts on that one?
Essentially the same. I mean, it all comes down to how powerful do you want to believe Ford is, and really, we have no way to measure this. To this point, it seems that he can pretty much do whatever he wants. So it seems as though if Ford wants to get back in, he would. But yeah, it goes more along with the theme of empowerment for Ford, again, not to be jumping in and out of hosts and making decisions for them. That would make more sense with the overall theme of this actual story. But I don't know if you're doing that, because it is a TV show, and they've written in a very ambiguous way about how powerful Ford really is.
Yeah, I think I would say that two things I'm pretty certain on, and Hax, I'll come to you in a moment because you've got any additional thoughts on this one. The first one is that Ford was happy and wanting Bernard to feel that he was now free and able to do his own thing, because all the way through this season, Bernard has been incredibly passive, I would say, not a protagonist. He's been sort of dragged around by people. He's been pushed and made to do stuff. He's not really been a person driven by his own agenda. And then now, really, for the first time here, he was, when he decided what to do. And I think Ford was wanting that. So that's my first point. And the second point is that I think there is no way on earth we're going to able to ever say that we've got rid of Ford, because he might have just uploaded himself somewhere else. Who knows? He could be anywhere. So I think that there's no way we can say that for certain. But Hax, did you have any other thoughts on that? Is Ford gone?
Yeah, so definitely not gone. So what Vanessa was referencing is a JavaScript engineer posted that on Reddit, and yeah, it does state that Ford is still essentially there in the code. I think it's just as self-explanatory. He's not gone. The only thing that I don't want for them to go with is that he can traverse to other hosts. The idea that maybe he was deleted from Bernard, but maybe he's still in Maeve, or maybe he just went to another host. The idea of being able to use this mesh network to get entire host consciousnesses to each other, kind of like takes away from the drama. And I think we won't see it now, but if they do go that route, then later on we'll see, everyone's just okay, this body's dead, we'll all go to this one. This body's dead, we'll all go to this one. It's just Dolores running away with 50,000 minds in her mind, and we don't know what to actually believe anymore. So I don't think they will, but I hope they don't.
Yeah, unfortunately, haven't we already kind of seen that with him, transferring throughout Lawrence's daughter and the younger version of himself? They have introduced that, but I do agree I don't want it. But I think it's been introduced that is a real possibility.
Well, so it still leaves it open with either those are executed commands or it is legitimately him, So.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so we are slightly related to this, and going back to Maeve as well. Kerry McDonald, thank you very much for the super chat. That's very kind. Saying great chat. What if the host Ford was making? This is, I assume, the host that we saw being built in his secret lab way back in season 1. What if that host was Maeve? Might be a stupid question, but thank you. I'm going to miss this. Well, we'll miss doing it too. Guys, does anyone want to pick up on that one? Let's go straight back to you, Justin. Why not? So was the host that Ford was making back then Maeve?
Man, yeah, do you just know? My stance on this whole situation. I really don't believe
you have a view.
It was anybody's in particular, but again, I cannot trust the showrunners anymore because they did come out and say that it was just more of a cinematic effect that they wanted to show, but that has been thrown out the window with the reemerging of Ford. So I don't think so, but it's totally possible. I don't like the idea though. I'll just leave it at that.
No, I wonder whether they're going to keep it enigmatic for a while. To be honest, Kerry, it's one of those things. And a few people actually mentioned in the chat about the title of episode 10, which we'll come on to in a moment, being The Passenger. And this does have sort of implications of, what if somebody's, as we've already seen, Bernard carrying Ford around inside his mind effectively. Does this mean that we're going to have another situation a bit like that of somebody being carried out of the park or wherever inside somebody's mind? I don't know. It's entirely possible, but we will come back to that one. I just wanted to stick with Bernard as we're there. He the second thing that I think was useful. I said there were 3 things which were really interesting there. Was that he said about the forge. Now, this was the first time that we've sort of learnt exactly what it was that was going on with the forge. And this kind of links with, and Vanessa, I'll come to you on this one first. If you could give your own précis of what the forge is, just so we're all clear on that going into the last episode. But linked to that, the third thing that I think was really important was that he went off and saying that he was going to do it my way. He was going to do his thing when he got there, and he clearly is going to be one of the first people getting there, I think. So Vanessa, that's a sort of a double question for you. What is the forge, and what do you think Bernard is actually planning on doing when he's getting there?
So I'll answer the second question first. And I'm not entirely sure, but I just, I don't know if he was lying to Elsie, but he does say to Elsie that they were going to leverage, I think he says something about leveraging that information to bring this to an end. So I don't know if he's going to try and blackmail Delos to reach an agreement between the humans and the hosts in some way. So, we're going to release this information if you don't allow us to exist somehow. If you destroy us, we'll find a way to get this out and destroy your company and and cause all kind of chaos in the real world. So I don't know if that's maybe his plan. But as far as the forge goes, it seems to me that it's really just like the cradle on steroids, except instead of a bunch of hosts' consciousnesses or whatever you want to call them floating around, it's humans, and it's much bigger, but it still looks like it's still running simulations. So I don't know if it's just recycling memories or if it's actually running through possible scenarios that could happen with these human minds in different circumstances. So a theory I had way back at the beginning was that Dolores was going to use the cradle to figure out what the all the scenarios that could possibly happen after the rebellion to order to plan for what could possibly happen. And that's why Bernard seems so strange on the beach, like he's already been through this before. So maybe that's going to happen in the Forge. And I don't know if you want to start talking about the next episode yet, or not. I'll leave it at that if we're just going to table that and talk about the next episode in a few minutes.
Yeah, let's cover the what we think will happen in just a couple of minutes,
Okay.
and focus in on what the plan might be. Justin, let's go to you then. What do you think? So Vanessa raised this idea that he'd already talked about leveraging the information to try and get both sides together in some way. What do you think his plan is?
We have to wonder how much that plan has changed now after the recent events, and it's going to be tough to maybe leverage it if William is not in the same state of mind as he was before. I think that, I believe that it's been just said that it's a far larger facility than the Cradle was, and all I know is that it is, it has the water using as a coolant to a point, so that kind of links up with the flooding. And I do believe that Bernard does plan on destroying it because we do see a flood. And it does seem to be as though it is in the same area. Well, it is definitely the same area as the Valley Beyond. So, and then you have the Valley Forge connection with the Revolutionary War and George Washington and all that, and the ability to endure pain and the fidelity of a soldier that relates to this, that famous statement by Washington. So, there's a lot of symbolism here, and I don't really know if they're going to be able to leverage the information per se as they were planning on doing before, because there's been all these events of the last episode that, like Westworld loves to do, just throw a wrench in that plan, at least as far as I'm concerned. But it's really hard to say how they would leverage that now.
Yeah, I agree that, particularly with the point about we have to ask whether this plan has changed. The plan that he said did come when Ford was still in his mind. So the question is, if he's saying I want to do it my way, is his way different to that? Hax, have you got any thoughts on this? What plan he might have going there?
Yes, I don't think his intentions align with the hosts. I don't think. I think logically we connect the two. It makes sense that he would also want to escape with everyone. But I want to cite the interaction when he's fighting off Ford. He says, I merely offer you choices. It's entirely up to you, but it's about the birth of an entire species. And he says, "Get out of my head. I need to let you go, or I need you to let me go." So essentially, Ford's alignment is to get the hosts out, in particular, get Bernard to safety. However, Bernard states that I can stop this on my own, and then. Ford replies, "Indeed, Bernard, you're the only one who can stop it all." I don't think that Bernard's intentions are going to be exactly what we think they're going to be. I think he might actually be the person we end up hating because he somehow sabotages this entire plan, because he is still a human sympathizer, still relates himself as more of a human than a host. I don't know. There's something about this scene that I think in retrospect we'll look back and go, oh, wow, he was trying to stop it all. And if stopping it all is I don't know what else, stopping it all could be, if you know what I mean. So I think that potentially he gets to the Forge with Dolores or whoever, and ends up doing the exact opposite. Instead of allowing Dolores to use it against all humanity and take out everyone, because he sympathizes with Elsie. He loves Elsie. And he doesn't want to see the death of humanity, but he also doesn't want to die himself. And if Dolores is just going to cause the death of humanity, to be the Deathbringer, then he's going to want to stop that, in my opinion. So I don't know. I think it's not as crystal clear as maybe we believe it to be, just because of certain interactions like this.
Yeah, I'd agree. I don't think it's going to be as straightforward as we think. I think that I agree. He cares a lot about Elsie, which is why he left her behind. I think this is probably good, because I think a lot of people are probably going to die there in the Valley Beyond, and I got a soft spot for Elsie. I think she's a great character, and I certainly want her to survive until next season. That said, wouldn't surprise me. She's resourceful if she makes it there herself without Bernard. So
I just want her getting into dental school. That's all I want.
My only concern with Elsie is, so she was left and 11 days later, we don't see her in that timeline. So she been wandering around the park for 11 days. Like, what? I want to know what happened to her.
You know, it's funny, as someone pointed out, it was like, they're actively pulling off guns off of dead Delos employees, and he states, "Yeah, Delos will be there shortly. Don't worry." And I mean, you're actively pulling off weaponry from their dead bodies. I don't know if they're going to be that receptive immediately.
Yeah. I mean, I actually don't worry too much about Elsie. Is that, yes, she's not there. There's a lot of people who aren't there, so I don't know. I wonder whether she somehow got caught up with wherever all those hosts have gone. Because let's not forget that while we're talking and thinking about who caused this flood, where are all these host dead bodies coming from? Where's Dolores? Where's Maeve? Where are all the hosts? Those are the missing people. That's who we should be really asking where they are.
Felix and Sizemore and Sylvester.
Exactly. There's so many people who are missing from that 2 weeks later timeline. Just to sort of wrap that bit up, there were a couple of things I just wanted to pick up on. Vanessa, slightly earlier on when you were talking about the Forge with Bernard perhaps having worked through lots of different possibilities of what might happen. I'm very taken by that idea. I like it a lot. That, for me, makes a lot of sense of how he can know what people are about to say, because he's gone through so many iterations of this. And also the other thing, and there's probably not time for people to go back and rewatch stuff before episode 10, but I honestly think if you look at the first little bit of episode 1, that interaction between Dolores and Bernard, when he starts talking about, I woke up and I saw you were on the other side of an ocean, that has to be based on, that's not just a random thing he said. That, for me, if we're working on the assumption that that Westworld is on an island, that has to be based on this idea of them escaping and him waking up, looking out over an ocean, and them being on the other side, which implies him having seen them disappear. And the ending all of this, I think, has to be the struggle between Delos and the hosts. That's my take on it. I think that it's he seems quite pacifistic, Bernard. He doesn't actually seem to want to have conflict, and I think he's wanting to end conflict. Yes, he wants to help the hosts, but I think the main aim is to end the conflict. Let's go on to the last bit before we get on to next episode, which I'm very keen to do because there was an amazing trailer that Vanessa, in a bit, hopefully you're going to be up to speed again and will be able to quickly talk us through. Apologies for putting you on the spot, but I thought I'll give you a minute to get up to it. Let's talk about Dolores and Teddy, because we had, and perhaps why don't we go to Justin first on this one? So we didn't have much here, but we had Dolores has lost pretty much all of her crew now and is really just left with Teddy. And then Teddy seems to make this decision that he just can't go on. He loves Dolores too much to kill her, but he can't carry on. What did you make of that whole scene? What takeaway do you have from that?
I initially did not like it, but I was only able to do a quick rewatch with everything I had going on this week. I'm coming around to it. I believe, yes. I mean, obviously, Dolores and MIB's stories are mirroring each other, and they're becoming more and more isolated, meaning this journey has to, be undergone alone. But I think that really, too, it goes back to the hosts don't have the luxury of being able to remember things in an advantageous way or sculpt things in their mind any different than they were. So Teddy quite literally just cannot, live with this. He cannot keep going like this. It's interesting too that even with all the reprogramming Dolores has done, that there still is that semblance of Teddy, in there. And so what makes me wonder is, will this series really get rid of James Marsden? I think that's a valid question. Is Teddy that essential? Teddy seems to be more of a tool in both seasons. So I think that at the beginning of the season, if you would ask me if they could go on without that character, I would have been really against it. But in hindsight, I think they really could. I think we're going to have quite a few characters that won't be there next season. So I think that it was just a good example too of how they can't put things in their head in a way that works for them. They have to look at things in a very factual way, and he just could not reconcile with that. I think it was very interesting, and it's very moving. You know, I mean, he was a tool, but he was also, you know, a love interest, and Dolores is the one that brought him to that point when all she wanted to do was save him, and it brought him to his suicide.
Yeah, and Hax, perhaps you can just sort of expand on that. I think I would agree with a lot of that personally. I've never been a huge Teddy fan, and I found it was quite. But I quite liked this last bit when he didn't lose his old character. It was wiped over, but he didn't lose all his memories and even his view of what Dolores was doing when he got this sort of change in his character. But Hax, perhaps you could pick up on the next step or the impact on Dolores. What do you think that this is going to do to Dolores, who's been incredibly driven and also incredibly reliant on Teddy as an emotional support, as well as being a person who does what she wants to do? What impact do you think this will have on her?
So I don't know. I think, well, so first off, I think that Teddy's gone. I think we might see him in the Forge at some point, but I don't know. I think he's done. The idea of Dolores's impact. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, I really think it comes down to Dolores was so readily, you know, to change him and say, okay, you're this person now, you know, sacrifice your identity so that you can better suit my needs. I think, you know, her cornerstone, I don't believe, is Teddy. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, carry on. What do you think her cornerstone is?
I'm actually not sure, but we know that Teddy's was Dolores, and that was kind of the reason that she took her own life. But man, I feel like we know the cornerstone. I don't remember it though. Maybe we don't. But the idea of, I don't know. I don't think he's really needed. I think that the Wyatt personality is kind of taken over, and yeah, I mean, I think at some point we'll see a severance of this Wyatt and Dolores personality. It's not going to be as, you know, a merger as they previously described, because at the end of the day, you'll always question, you know, am I still being controlled in some kind of way? So I think that not important.
Sure. I mean, I think that it was very, very clear to me that Dolores meant more to Teddy than Teddy meant to Dolores. But I don't think that will undermine the fact that this will have an impact on her going into the last episode. And I think that there was a clear symmetry between what happened with the Man in Black losing the last person that he cared for, or who cared about him, or there was his last close relationship, as it were, and Dolores also losing her last close relationship just before the two of them head off to the Valley Beyond, to the Forge. I don't think that was a coincidence. I think that was very clear and intentional storytelling. Just to quickly pick up on the issue, is this the last we see of Teddy? I do wonder, and this is a complete random theory, but and straying slightly into what happens next episode, so apologies for getting ahead of ourselves, but we did see a very small shot in the trailer of what looked like Dolores printing off one of those control units, a host control unit, some point in season in episode 10, which, as they're going to the Forge, makes you wonder who out of all of the different hosts she might want to bring back. And there are 2 or 3 possibilities, but one of them I think definitely is Teddy. So we may not have seen the last of him. Go, Vanessa.
I just had a comment about that pearl, because I initially thought, you know, is she printing that for someone? But then I thought again about how Bernard put himself in the cradle, and it was taking out his pearl and like inserting it into some kind of mechanism that would allow him to merge with the cradle. So is that and then we talked about Abernathy being the key. So is it his pearl that's like unlocking all the encrypted data in the Forge? That's what I was thinking that might be. I don't know.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. That is.
We also have the line of that which is real is irreplaceable. So, you know, recreating Teddy goes against that ideology right there. Right. You know, it's the idea of the value of scarcity in the the inclusion of stakes in this actual story that we're watching. That's very vital to be a series that we're actually invested in. So yeah, I don't believe it would be Teddy, especially with that line of dialogue. That which is real is irreplaceable.
Great. Well, I love it when I get overruled by my guests. This is what is and I mean that in all honesty. It's the kind of thing where I have my views and then other people come in with other incredibly well argued points that make me go, maybe I judged too quickly on that one. But we will probably find out very soon. Guys, I just want to, as always, just take a very quick moment just to say a few things from my subscribers and patrons, things that are coming up. We did start a bit late, so I'll keep this one very quick. If you've joined this channel looking at the Westworld content, please also have a look at my Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire content. It's on the channel, so please feel free just go and have a flick at that if you're interested in that. That would be fantastic. And then secondly, I noticed that somebody had helpfully put up, one of the moderators had helpfully put up the link to The Well Told Tale, which is my new channel, which is coming out very soon. That is going to be me narrating stories. That's all it's going to be. I'm just going to be choosing the best novels, stories, science fiction, fantasy, speculative fiction stories ever written, and I'm just going to be narrating them long form, and I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm really excited, starting with The War of the Worlds and Frankenstein. So, and we're just going to go on from there. And then patrons, I say this every time, I can't do this without you. If anyone out there is a regular viewer, wants to support the channel, wants to get access to more of my material, please do check out my Patreon page. That's patreon.com/InDeepGeek. There's a link down in the description. But guys, Vanessa, is there anything you particularly want to draw people's attention to?
Well, we'll still be covering some of the post-finale news and information next week and in the weeks to come over at westworldwatchers.com. Definitely check us out at Watchers on the Wall, as well as we'll start ramping up Game of Thrones in the next few months. Hopefully we'll get some solid information on when that's coming back next season. So be sure to keep in touch with us in both places.
Absolutely. I'm very keen to find out when that's coming back. Hax and then Justin, if that's okay.
Certainly. So, yeah, Hax Dogma on YouTube or Twitter. In the postseason, I'm going to be doing some scene breakdowns. I'll probably be expanding to other TV shows and movies, and kind of just cover anything and everything that I think that I can honestly apply criticism to and display something unique to the internet. So, once again, Hax Dogma on YouTube or Twitter, and thank you so much.
And yeah, if you're going to me, absolutely. Thank you for having me on, Robert, and Justin Thomas Show on YouTube, of course. And make sure to check out the Amino community that I run. And I'm always looking to, help other content creators. And I like to collaborate with different people and make things happen and bring great minds together. So make sure to check out Three Great Minds after the show, too, before the dust settles, which should be hopefully a really epic post-show with me, the great Hax Dogma, who we have with us right now, and then the great W. Axel Foley from Westworld Theory Cast. We'll be on at 11 o'clock, so about just about a half hour after the show goes off air. So, and hopefully we will have some answers for all of the questions. And yeah, thank you again for having me on, Robert.
Absolute pleasure, guys. I said it partway through, but I really appreciate what you guys have brought to this. It's you've got so much expertise between you that it's created a fantastic dynamic, and so I really do appreciate it. You mentioned quickly the amino there, Justin. I just wanted to say just a little warm up. I'm going to be doing a giveaway on my next video, my episode breakdown for the finale of Game of Thrones, sponsored by Amino, to be giving away a fantastic piece of art by the one and only Vanessa Cole, who is an incredibly talented Westworld and Game of Thrones artist. So if you're at all interested in getting hold of some free, excellent art, then please do check out my video, which should be coming out tomorrow. When you get back from work after the episode. But that's enough plugging. I just wanted to say I think that we had another super chat. Andrew Massin, $10. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. But Vanessa, over to you, having embarrassed you. Do you want to just quickly run us through episode 10? We had a fantastic trailer. There was so much in there. Just the sort of the headlines. What can we expect from episode 10?
So I'll try to run through this fairly quickly, but I've got a lot of thoughts. Now, I'm sorry in advance if I ramble for a minute. But so the Forge, like I said, I feel like there's got to be some way to run scenarios that could possibly happen and figure out, all the iterations of what's going to happen when Delos comes and make a plan for all of those infinite possibilities. I mean, they are hosts with computers in their heads. It wouldn't seem like it would be a difficult thing for them to do, because I feel like the whole thing with Bernard being found on the beach, it's all part of some master plan or a trap that they've set for them. I don't think he just destroyed everything. I mean, like I said, where did Dolores go? And I think Bernard is in on it somehow, because they go into the Forge together. It looks like they find Logan in there. Who knows what he's going to reveal to them as they're kind of going through everything. I think they're going to learn some really vital, important information about what the Forge is and what it can do. So Dolores is wanting to use it as a weapon. Either she's wanting to expose Delos doing this. It's really tough to say what else it could be used for. The only other thing I can think is that they've got human bodies in host form already made, because anticipating this Delos project was going to be successful. And so, if they take some of the control units out of some of those hosts and put them in these bodies and they escape into the real world that way she's not all by herself, and she has somewhat of an army to kind of infiltrate the real world and, figure out how to take over. I don't know how in the world she thinks it's going to happen. But apparently she has a plan. But just with those virgin control units that had no data on them, they had never had anything on them at all. I feel like they took empty new ones that had never been used and stuck them in those bodies and then put the real host units in them. And that's part of the way they escaped. And I think one of the things I found interesting was the body of Charlotte, that she kind of confronts this host body of herself. And so I was wondering if Dolores has been in her this whole time, this whole 11 days since they make it to the Forge before Strand gets there. Has she been in this host body of Charlotte? Has Charlotte been dead this whole time, and it's been Dolores kind of running the show and leading them back into this valley, into a trap? So I got a lot of thoughts. And we also see William. It looks like he's going to be working with Dolores and Bernard, hopefully helping them take this whole operation down. I don't see him surviving. He mentioned something about filming next June for season 3, but he said he didn't know if he was going to be in it yet. So I don't see him making it through the end of the season. I feel like he has to die. And I hope Charlotte dies, because I really can't stand her anymore. And then Maeve, we haven't seen her, so I feel like she must make it out. I hope our human friends survive and make it out as well, but I think there might be some additional sacrifices in there. I think that's kind of it in a nutshell. I think that's kind of the thoughts I had about where things are headed.
Excellent. Well, there's a lot there to unpack. So let's just take these in chunks. First of all, and let's get to Hax on this one. First of all, the Forge. Now we've talked about what this is. It seems to be like a massive version of the Cradle, but with these mapped human minds in it, as well as host minds in it. And we seem to see, and spoiler alert, obviously you're expecting this, but we seem to see Bernard and Dolores enter the Forge and wander around, and it looks massive inside, and we see at least a couple of characters that we know, humans that we know from the outside world. What do you think is going on there? What do you think they're wanting to do, and what do you think they will achieve in their hacks?
So it's interesting. With them going in together, Dolores needs to get this data out of the park, because if she wants to use it as a weapon, it can't just exist there. In my last video, kind of breaking down the trailer just a tad, I kind of reinforced this idea of the satellite and how it's been this overall existing thing that has always failed, but it always existed. I think that might come into it. I think that getting the data out of the park, whether it is the physical pearl or some kind of way with the shot we see with the 4-beamed laser, it incorporates the satellite in some way. I don't know. I think that's her goal, right? Bernard's goal, I think that might not be that, as we previously talked about. I'm not sure. I think that what we see in the cradle is going to be interesting, and I'm still really hoping that we see just a plethora of the James Delos experiment incubation pods being going through Fidelity at some point. But if it is just the cradle, then that'll equally be cool. But I don't know. Just seeing that image would be amazing.
Excellent. Just another super chat. Thank you, Steve Cancel, one of my newest patrons, actually, just this week. So welcome, Steve, and thank you so much for that. Saying, can we talk about Westworld's location? He thinks it could be a biodome. So perhaps, Justin, if you could pick up on that. Do we think there's a biodome? We'll touch on the tear in a moment, so to try not to get into that one. But if you can talk location and then what you think is going on with this set of scenes that seem to be set inside the forge.
Hey guys, I don't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to say really quick, I'm going to have to jump off. But it was really great chatting with everybody and sharing my thoughts about this finale episode. So hopefully we can get together afterwards and share our thoughts about what all happened. But it's really great being with you guys. And thanks for watching, everyone.
An absolute pleasure. I know I speak for lots of people who've said to me, just sort of both in the chat and sort of elsewhere, they've really valued your contributions. And yes, I certainly hope that we can have you on for just a roundup of the whole season. But thank you very much. Understand you have to go.
Great to see you. Bye.
Justin, do you want to take over and answer those?
On the dome?
Yeah, so well, first of all, where is Westworld? Is it in a biodome? And then secondly, did you have any extra thoughts on the forge and what was going on in there?
Yeah, really quick. I think that they're clearly implying that it's in the South China Sea. There's already islands of this size that are being made and are made in the South China Sea. And I do believe that it is some sort of a biodome. I'm not going to get all techie with it because it's a television show and they could just insert any line of dialogue to justify what it is. But I do believe that, like, I have the whole Brunelleschi thing and, the using of the Renaissance art to kind of explain away the unexplainable. And I think that I wouldn't be surprised to see the dome within a dome being utilized. Again, it's a television show, so they literally can just one line of dialogue, explain it away as some digital biodome and all that. And that might not mash up exactly with technology today. But again, a lot of things they're doing doesn't actually mash up with what technology is capable of doing today. They do try to be true to it. But, it's just one of those things of, yeah, I would stick with biodome. Makes sense to me. And I think a lot of people would have no qualms with that issue. I will bring up kind of a tinfoil theory. I always have been fascinated with Maeve's departure that she doesn't end up taking at the finale of last season. Everything that she needed, they said, in the real world was in that bag of hers, that brown bag. Maeve gets off the train, but that bag doesn't. I kind of view that bag as the passenger. And I kind of think that this data could already be outside of the park because, again, that bag was left on the train. Because I'm a firm believer in there's no way every host gets out, for one. And it's either, I think, going to be Maeve getting out and being able to communicate with those in, because how are you going to really have Delos versus the hosts? Or they're going to have to introduce another antagonist, and a much stronger antagonist, I would prefer, than Charlotte Hale. If I'm going to be kind of nitpicky about the show, I don't think Charlotte Hale is a very good antagonist. I think it's kind of a weak antagonist for this series. And I'd like to see a little bit more of a fight, even though I know it's all about the fight within. But I think that we could see the data already being out there, whatever the hosts need already being out there, are them making contact with possibly hosts that are living outside. Since Maeve can communicate through the mesh network, maybe she can communicate with hosts that are already out there. But it's always intrigued me about what's in that bag that Felix gives her, and that bag definitely doesn't get off that train. So I just think that could really play a role, and that bag could be the passenger. I just think it's a cool way to look at it. Will it be right? Probably not. But, it's an interesting way to look at it.
Yes, good theory. And I think in my view, in terms of where is Westworld? I think it is on an island. I think that's reasonably certain now. And I think that, yes, there is a biodome or a series of biodomes which allow, they've clearly got some form of climate control going on, because we've got Westworld's deserts right next to the snowy mountains of Japan and so on. So they've clearly got some kind of climate control going on. And you also can't see the Mount Fuji, which is massive, which appears to be right next to Westworld. So they've clearly got something going on there. Biodomes make sense to me. In terms of the Forge, I think the thing I would suggest happens is that Bernard perhaps goes in first with, and then Dolores follows, and Logan seems to meet them. Looking at the trailer pictures, and Logan, I would suggest, is probably in the same frame of mind he was before when he was alive, and Logan was not wanting to have for this whole thing to go. He wouldn't approve of the Forge. He would want the Forge to be destroyed. And so if he is leading them around the Forge, as it were, if this part of his character is still there, but obviously he's not this kind of like drunken shooting up person. He's somebody who's completely sober within the Forge, who is trying to lead Dolores and Bernard to show them what it's like. That, I think, for me, is quite an exciting idea. So they are inside the Forge, and they are learning about what's going on from somebody who wants it destroyed. And I think that is a fantastic and interesting idea. Let's move on from the Forge. So we've got a couple of characters going into the Forge, and we assume that they make it back out again, because we certainly see Bernard a bit later, assuming that's the same Bernard we saw before. And I think it's likely that Dolores escapes as well. So leaving that bit to one side, we then get this strange, well, before that we get Clementine apparently going into battle on the horse in front of the man in black, in front of the Delos forces, heading towards all of the hosts who have been gathered. These are the hosts who have been brought by the Ghost Nation. And this is turning the hosts against each other. So, Hax, I'll come to you on this one. We'll get to the tear in the sky in just a second. But what do you think is going on there, apart from the obvious of Clementine turning people against each other, and how on earth might they combat this?
So it is really interesting, the idea of this power, and I think it's going to come down to what the show creatively chooses to do with it. Because at the end of the day, they've now shown that Maeve has an ability to communicate with people miles away using proximity based on this mesh network. So my first thought was, oh my God, they hacked it. They now understand how to control the hosts. Why would they not manipulate that so that they could, from range, just do it, to start causing Maeve to have issues, to start causing the hosts to, kill each other or whatever it's supposed to be. I mean, even the fact that they chose to make them kill each other is interesting, because equally they could have just had them stand still. They could have equally just said, turn off your brain, and they would just drop and so it's really cinematic. What they're choosing to do is what we're going to see. And I think exactly that. I think that it's going to be the big heroic scene of, her charging on horse toward Maeve, and the people kind of splitting apart, them trying to get to this unknown rip in the sky before Clementine gets there for whatever reason, because Maeve's reaction isn't one to, like, she's now, the only time that we see her kind of like run away is when she has that PTSD moment of the Ghost Nation. Every other time when she's confronted with the conflict, it comes down to, oh yeah, I'm the boss. I have all the powers, and just kill each other. So the fact that she is retreating means that we either get a moment between the two in which she's like, oh my God, I can't hurt Clementine, or she understands for whatever reason that she has this power and she can't stop her, so she has to run. And I think that's really where it's going to end off.
Sure. Have you got anything to add to that, Justin?
No, I think that, quite clearly that was the only good move that the QA has made this whole season, the only sign of competence whatsoever, which again leads to, me having the overall feeling of them being weak antagonists in general. Again, love the show, but it's important to pick out issues that one may have with what they love. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. They weaponized Clementine. That's what they should have done. It is, but like Hax says, you know, and it's, again, because it's a TV show, and it's a good point that, you know, why didn't they just make everybody drop dead? Why are they fighting if she can control them? You know, why don't they just have them drop dead? Again, it's, you know, for the cinematic, you know, aspect. So really not much. I mean, you perfectly said. It seems to be the way it's going. You know, the sky is falling down upon them, and Clementine is riding in on this white horse. I almost look at this, and I'm sure we'll get to it, about the recording. It looks like we have a host hand writing. It's almost like their genesis, almost like the recording of not only their history, but their mythology in a way. They're biblical.
So perhaps we'll get onto that the writing in just a second. Just to tie up this thing, so we get Clementine riding in, we get all the hosts turning on one another, we even get what looks, if you freeze frame the trailer, as I'm sure a few of us have, just to look at those little flickering images at the end, what looks like a Ketcheter turning on Maeve, which is really quite a powerful move if that actually is what's going on, because it implies that Clementine can affect even someone like a Ketcheter, who is fully self-aware and awakened and conscious and all the rest of it. So we get what looks like a complete breakdown of order in the group that the Ghost Nation are trying to get out, and that seems to be happening right in front of what looks like a tear or a crack or a break or something in the sky. Now, if we're going on the, well, first of all, to say, so the scene here looks like a Ketcheter and Maeve, who incidentally, this means they've met up. Great. Presumably Maeve's daughter's there somewhere as well. They have been guiding their people to where they consider the door to be. But that's the moment at which Clementine and Delos attack. And they get caught between Clementine and this crack, whatever it is. So the question, I'll come to Hax first on this one. There's a sort of a vaguely techie one. My first instinct looking at that was, first of all, this seems to be connected to that big laser thing we saw in the trailer. And secondly, if we are talking some kind of biodome or something like that, is this a crack or a break in that somehow? So what's your take from a sort of a techie position, first of all?
Yeah, certainly. So I think so starting off with the laser, I think if the laser was a part of the system that controlled the virtual walls of the biodome, or, you know, maybe I'm not completely set that it's a biodome. It could actually be a just giant hologram walls. It would also accomplish the same thing. So but if these projectors were a part of that system, they wouldn't be as look like a field unit. They would be a more permanent structure with dust on them and you know, covered in things. What we see, it looks like they just set up this thing, which is why I believe it's the phased array, specifically a laser phased array, and so it's part of the satellite communication. And I'm sorry, what was the first part of the question?
So it's well, first of all, what is it that we're seeing? So what if it's connected up with this ray in some way? That the implication, I think I would agree with, that the ray seems to be something which is projecting something up there in some way. You were saying, I think that's a good point about it didn't seem to be a permanent installation, because it wasn't sort of set down as that. This seemed to be some sort of movable thing, but it is, what is it that we're seeing between the crack? Is it?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. So yeah, I think it is. I think it's just and this laser may be used to create that crack. I'm not ruling that out either. But by whatever means this crack exists, and it's probably maybe like a catastrophic event correlated to when they destroy the cradle, or I'm sorry, the forge. What we're seeing, any science fiction term you could possibly think of. I mean, the couple close-ups kind of look like they're two different worlds. Like one is slightly more green and one is slightly more dark gray or tan. So it's definitely leading into a new world. But if it's a data transmission, I've seen some people talk about. But in my opinion, it's the virtual world, the virtual walls around the place to establish the immersion are collapsing, and the way out of the park is going to be through this crack, not the door, as Akichi just described it. The new world is actually, I don't know if they understand that the Forge is a world in and of itself, they may be going to that world. There's a lot of reference of the new world, but to exit the park physically, I think this is how they're going to do it.
Yeah, that certainly seemed to be the implication of what we saw in the trailer, I think, is that it's a crack, whether it's a crack in a projection or a crack in a biodome, I think actually makes not so much of a difference. That is the gateway between two worlds, as it were. And I agree. Another way that this could be is that they could be wanting to go into the Forge, but personally I can't see that, because I think that the people are wanting to destroy the Forge. I liked the idea of perhaps it surviving. A couple of my patrons came to me with the idea that perhaps some of season 3 might be set inside the Forge, which I thought was a fascinating idea, but I think there are enough people who want to destroy it that it's unlikely to survive. So Justin, we'll come to you on this one as well. What do you think? Is this the door that we see in front of us when we see that crack?
What we have to ask first is Maeve, because again, it's a trailer, so somebody put it in the chat quite well, tomfoolery. So it is meant to mislead us a little bit. So we have to decide if Maeve is stating they need to run because this is their opening, or if they're running from Clementine, or maybe both. Also, if you just use Plato's allegory of the cave, which is a perfect metaphor for this whole show, the slightest crack in one's reality can shine a light so bright through it'll blind those who are not enlightened. And so this could be a way of the chosen hosts that could truly ascend to ascend, and those who are not going to ascend to be blinded by the light. If they're going to go with the metaphorical way, or dive into the philosophy of it, it fits either way. I mean, the maze was a metaphor; it wasn't physical. So to switch it up, it would make sense for it to be a physical door. But I don't know where I stand from it. It really depends on if we view Maeve yelling "run" as "run, this is our opening," or "run from Clementine," which of course the context of that won't be clear until tonight. But I think I like the idea of some being stuck in the Forge, and when I do tend to believe the Forge will be destroyed, though, especially with the fact that it seems as though the man in black is deemed unworthy of entering this. So it's almost like he's created a heaven or some sort of a afterlife per se, that he is not worthy of entering, which is quite poetic in itself. So I think there's a lot of different ways they could go in it. And if Logan, which we see Logan is in the Forge, because we see a unhealthy looking Logan, which is a drug riddled Logan in the real world talking to his father, which we can just assume is a flashback, and then we see a perfectly healthy looking one. He is adamantly against this idea. So we would think that the projection of him within this Forge would he'd be a main proponent of getting rid of the Forge. So I don't see the Forge surviving. But it's just coming down to, is this a physical door or is it a metaphorical one? How do they ascend, and what the real world is outside of Westworld?
Yeah, so I think I agree with all of that. I think that it's likely that the Forge will be destroyed because there are people inside it and outside it who want it to be destroyed. I think that when Maeve says "run," I think that she is probably talking about this is how you get away from Clementine, because she seems to have some sort of radius, perhaps, of how far she can project her commands. And this tear seems to be showing us the outside world. And I think whether it's just a tear in a projection or a tear in a biodome, it's a door, it is a way through. I don't think that the Forge itself is where you get to the outside world. The only ways that we've known to get to the outside world seem to have been this train, unless there's another way off that we don't know about. So that's where the big culmination comes that there's also the flooding happening, and there's also the what Vanessa was talking about a little while ago, which is the brain wipes, or the complete new brain units, that there seem to be completely empty in some of the hosts. What do we think? And I'm going to ask you, because we're going to start wrapping up, I think, in about 10 minutes time, and I want to get another couple of questions there. But let's get to how on earth do we get to Bernard being washed up on the beach? And Hax, I'll go to you again first. What do you think happens to allow us to get to that point with a flooded area, flooded valley, and some hosts with completely clean minds, and lots of other hosts who have completely disappeared?
I mean, I think it's all simulation. Looking at the trailer specifically, I believe Dolores has a line about "let's do this again," and then we see maybe even a second of footage, and it was him walking toward the beach, and then him in a downward movement, moving downward toward the ground, and then finally him laying on the ground. So I don't know. I mean, this entire time I've said this is a simulation. I think that if it's not, I'll be shocked. But that's where I rest. And I'm not opposed to other ideas. It could be that he was put there, as a trap for Delos, because of the scene with Teddy and Angela and Dolores kind of learning that how many troops that Delos would bring, and so now they know the location. The idea that this was a trap is also something I referenced a few videos back, in the sense that they need to overcome the force, if the force that the Delos would bring, and what better way to do it would be a trap. Sure.
But if I can sort of push you on that, because I think that's a really good theory, and I know it's something you've had as a theory from very early on, that still doesn't answer the question of where we're going to end the season. So this is a simulation. We've been seeing the simulation. Where do the hosts? Where does Dolores and co end up?
I don't know. I mean, the idea of the satellite is something that's been stuck in my head. The idea of the Forge being called the New World, and people wanting to get to the New World has been stuck in my head. I think where we end is they probably exist in the outside world. I know that we talked before about maybe this entire season is just a failure, and they don't get out, and maybe we never see the outside world because it's in some kind of ruin. But I do believe that they get out. I just don't know how. It may be the perception of going into the Forge and then existing as they want on their own, because that's something interesting as well. Logan doesn't realize that he's in the Forge. The idea that he hates the world he's in. There will be a realization. We will see a realization of Logan going, "Oh my God, I died. Oh my God, I'm in the Forge. This is my entire, what is real, what is fake," and we'll see that breakdown of him. And that's also the same breakdown that we see that whenever William kind of makes James Delos realize that he's a host, is the trigger, is the thing that, this he's been fine for 35 days until you walked in there and said it. So I think that we'll see the breakdown of Logan. But the idea that the Forge can be this perception, and that Akecheta and has really religiously hit on that it's the New World, and everyone wants to get to the New World, and I don't know. I think it's something with that, but they could realistically take any route.
Sure, and I think I like the idea of Logan having a breakdown when he realizes he's dead. I do wonder whether when you're using the example of James Delos, I personally felt that was more of an issue when he was being mapped across and trying to join with the host body, rather than what if it's like the Cradle seems to be a default version of the mapped mind within the Forge. But that's a slight digression on that point. Justin, I wanted to come to you. What's your take then on how we get to the situation that we seem to be ending up with. Do you sign up to Hax's idea about that all being a simulation? And if so, where is everybody? Is Dolores out? What's going on?
I can't subscribe to the idea that it's a simulation. You're pulling too much character progression out from under the rug of the viewers. It would be a Dallas-esque moment where it's all a dream and it renders everything meaningless, meaning no stakes. It's bad storytelling. That's why it's hard to come to a conclusion at the end of that. It's a very interesting, proposition situation, but then it's hard, to look past it, because it's like, well, what do you do then? Once you pull the rug from under, you have that initial shock, but is it just shocking for the sake of shock? I believe it's possible, but we didn't see the letterbox aspect ratio when we see the first scene. I think it is possible that we're seeing them play out a number of different outcomes in the situation. Then that's what we witnessed in the beginning. But again, we don't see that. They did establish what is happening in the real world and what's happening within the cradle or the forge with aspect ratios. So it really just doesn't add up. And I think there's been a clear line also drawn between what James Delos, what was going on with James Delos outside of the cradle or the forge, and what happens when they're still existing within the cradle or the forge. It's not the same thing. It's a different experience for them, and it's not it doesn't make them hit that plateau, because they're not rejecting the body. It's more of like this limbo period for them. It's the with the intention of succeeding eventually, but they're in limbo until they do. So it's like this safe haven. I'm not ruling out that we're not seeing a simulation to a point. Because I think it does make sense that, like when they say, let's try this again, that they have ran through a few situations. But, it's very possible that is exactly what we're seeing. And since it would make sense for that valley to flood if the forge is destroyed, and it seems like the Man in Black might want to destroy that forge, maybe after the hosts that do get out, and kind of embrace that which is real is irreplaceable idea, because again, just like the cradle, the forge is holding people in this limbo, again, which would be Logan's worst nightmare. And this total lack of control of, it's just a total invasion of your choices and who you are by other people, mapping your memories and your, if you want to believe that's your consciousness or not, people are going to differ on that. So is this just a simulation of you, a replica of you, or is that really you? People's spiritual beliefs are going to differ on that. So I can't buy into the simulation, because it just doesn't go anywhere. And it's really just, I won't take to that at all, because it just takes too much away from the story. You cannot strip character progression away like that. It really rendering what do we got now? We have 10 episodes, 10 and a half hours of television that we've watched just means nothing. That would be a bad, Dallas is a example of doing something like that people know not to do. And that would be exactly that. So I think there could be the simulation to a point. That's where I've always met that theory. It's like not even halfway, but like a quarter way with it. Like maybe a little bit of simulation. Because there is, with the let's try this again, I think there's credence to that theory. It's just how far do you take the simulation?
Yeah, I agree. I do want to define. I think when I say I think this entire thing is a simulation, I'm not saying I think that everything we've seen is a simulation. Poor wording on my part. Defining what is and what isn't is really hard. It's all hearsay, and there's no way the letterbox ratio stays to suit. It very well could be, but we still don't have a way to explain him finishing the line. We still don't have a way to explain him seeing multiple scenes, different events entirely. In one part in which the hosts were executed, it was Rebus and then the woman, and then in another it was the woman was already dead and then Rebus died, which means that the interaction with Charlotte and Bernard about making him the most virtuous host in the West didn't happen in that event, because he didn't go forth and protect the woman before he died. So it's not seeing the events out of order. It's seeing two different events entirely. So I think it's all speculation, but I also think that a lot of this is going to be simulation, and I don't think it takes from the character progression, because at the end of the day, I don't know. It's gonna be awesome, and I think that we'll love it no matter what.
Well, I think we'll all agree on that one, and I think that was a really powerful point, Hax, about the seeing two different events that imply that there were different events happening much earlier. My own take on this is I tend to err towards the idea that they have gamed it, and I think that Vanessa and to a degree Justin have said similar things, is that they used the Forge, they being Dolores and Bernard, possibly Logan as well. They used it to game everything that they could possibly see about how might they get out of this? What is the possible way out? And work out what chain of events needs to happen. How do they do it, and how can they play it? And I wonder whether this might have actually happened even earlier in the Cradle. In fact, that's another possibility, and that for me explains how Bernard, he has lived through different versions of events, which allows him to see things that have happened in a number of different ways and to know what people are about to say. So that makes the most sense to me. And I think, although I completely accept Hax that it doesn't necessarily all, I think the phrase you used, play to suit, but I would be disappointed if having them set up the letterbox idea of these scenes are in the Forge/Cradle, if they then play against that by having the most important scene within it not in that aspect ratio. I would personally think that was a little bit pulling the wool over eyes too much, but that's just my own personal take.
So something that Chris Cole pointed out is we could perhaps see Bernard being run through the simulation and witnessing the people on the beach, right? So what he's seeing is that, like, what we saw was the present, and the reason that he finished the timeline is because previously he was ran through the simulation, and I'm actually pretty sold on that. I think that could be it, because then we would have a scene in which he would be standing on the beach witnessing the events in the aspect ratio, and then we would see the real event, which was day one of the beach.
Sure. Okay. I think I want to get onto just maybe one or two questions that have come up in the comments, but just I don't want to get too distracted on what happened on the beach thing. How do we think? Do we think, prediction time, guys, do we think that the hosts escape to somewhere, presumably the mainland, or is it going to be somewhere else? Do we think that they're going to get out? And if so, who and how? And Justin, I'll come to you first.
I kind of already laid out my whole tinfoil theory. I'm sticking with the passenger being the bag and there being a connect there. And there's no way all of them get out. There's going to be somewhat of what I see for the next season of seeing partial hosts being imprisoned and then some of the hosts being in the free world. I'm also not against the idea that Maeve at the end realizes that there already are hosts in the world, whatever that may look like. So I'm going with that. We don't get Ed Harris in the third season. We don't get Teddy, and that we will get we will get maybe a glimpse of, I think maybe what's even more important than what the world looks like is who is Charlotte talking to. Because like I said, this is such a weak antagonist here. That's why I have the issue with Carl Strand even pulling a lot of strings, because it's like, not a lot of people even give a shit about Carl Strand. He's done nothing great. So it's not very entertaining to think of the idea of him being the mastermind that Bernard's fighting against, because he's just not a strong enough character. So I think if we get a view of who they're talking to on the other side when they're having these conversations, would be very interesting. But I could see the hosts very well being punished, the ones that don't get out, for the actions of those that do. And that could be the situation of them trying to get back into Westworld in the third season, and also thriving in whatever the real world looks like. But yeah, I mean, I'm sticking with my team. If I had to bet money on it, I don't know if I would, but I would really like to see the connect with the passenger being that bag, because they did state that's everything you need in the real world. So I always find that to be interesting.
Great. And Hax, how about you? Do you think that we are going to see hosts escaping out of Westworld? And if so, who and how?
Yeah, so I think that we're going to see a lot of hosts escape. I think that we're also going to see. I think we're going to see a lot of people die. This is something that I was thinking about in the last couple of days. Is that none of the characters like Sylvester or Armistice, or like, they haven't done enough character progression for us to really care about them. So they can only keep so many actors for so long, and there's really no force for them. There's really no drive. Like, I'm Team Felix all the way, but there's nothing he's contributing. So I think we might see a lot of people die. And I also think that the way they get out of the park is going to involve satellites, and I think it's going to involve the Forge as well. Just this entire idea of it being a new land, and us seeing what I believe is a phased array. I don't know. Satellites, the Forge, a lot of people die. That's where I rest.
Well, I think if we had more time, I would get you to expand a bit more on the satellites bit. I have to say, but I think for me, yes, I think they will escape. I think that one of the things that we haven't really paid huge amounts of attention to is the time taken up in this 2 weeks later period, which incidentally, not all of it seems to be stuff that Bernard could have spotted, to be some of the scenes that Bernard's in a different part while we're seeing stuff that's going on there. So there does seem to be things that are happening there over a period of time, and that period of time seems to me to be a good period that will allow the hosts to escape in some way. They are being distracted by what's going on by having Bernard left there. That's my personal take. I think that one of Bernard's roles being left there is to just keep them occupied with just random things while they're investigating. And that, in terms of who I think is going to get out, I think we'll definitely see Dolores escape. I think we'll definitely see Maeve escape. I would love to see a Ketcheter out there, but I just have a feeling that he's a bit too tragic. I think he will probably die. It would not surprise. I think Bernard will survive, but he will survive on Westworld, and I think that we will see part of Maeve's crew, at least part of them, out there as well. And also, I think we're going to see Teddy back. I'm going to stick by that random prediction. I think that Teddy's going to return, and I think Dolores will reload him. We see the Teddy body lying there, but I think that the fact that he is, we think, one of the ones with the wiped or completely empty mind, which seems to imply that has been taken and used for a new Teddy to be downloaded from the Forge. So I think that we will see them there, and I'm going to stick by the prediction I've had for a while, which is the last scene of the season is going to be a group of hosts emerging out into the real world in some way. That's where I could see it, and perhaps it will even be coming out to where we saw Arnold's house, and we saw that scene way back whenever it was early on in the season. I think it might have been episode 2, and he promises Dolores that he will bring her back there one day. And I think that will be a touching way to round out the season, when through his actions, she makes it back out there. I think that'll be a really quite well-rounded way to end the season. But guys, I'm going to start rounding off the show now, because it's not too long now until I think we've got less than 2 hours now until the episode. Guys, is there anything particularly you want to draw out from the chat? And if not, do you want to just let people know where they can find you on the net? Justin, first, you.
I just want to thank everybody for coming. Thank everybody for listening to our different opinions and thoughts on this, and sharing your thoughts. That's what it's all about. It's all about the community. Make sure to join myself, also Hax Dogma, and W. Axel Foley for Before the Dust Settles tonight after the show, 11 p.m. Eastern time. And yeah, we will be looking forward to it. Thank you guys. I just hit over 2,000 subs earlier today. So started the season with 1,000 and then with 2,000. So thank you guys for supporting me. Check out my channel and consider supporting me on Patreon. And thank you, Robert, for being such a wonderful host throughout the season as well. And I mean that in a non, like robot way, just, an actual host. So thank you for everything you've done. And thank you for joining us as well, Hax. Always interesting to debate, to simulate or not to simulate. But thank you guys.
Great. Well, and just while you said that, congratulations, Justin, on 2,000 subscribers. I think it's an amazing feat to be doubling your subscriber base in one season. So, congratulations to you on that. Hax, over to you. Where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I just wanted to say, thank you guys so much. This entire season has been amazing. I mean, just and maybe not even for the content in which we watch, just the interaction in the community and reaching out to you guys and establishing the friendship that we have. It has been an awesome experience, and everyone in the chat, everyone listening now, I love you guys so much, and I'm so unbelievably amazed that I got to experience this. With that in mind, you can find me at Hax Dogma on Twitter or YouTube. Thank you so much, Robert.
Absolute pleasure, and I just have to echo those thoughts, guys. I've really enjoyed this, and that's not just building up great friendships with these guys here, but also the chat and the friendships that built up with the community. It's been absolutely amazing. So thank you, and I will be trying to do a wrapping up the whole season live stream some point midweek next week, so do look out for that. Two last things just to take away from me. The first one to say again, if you're here for my Westworld content, please do consider having a look at my Game of Thrones content as well. It's on this channel, so do feel free to go and have a look at that. And if you're a regular here and you fancy supporting the channel, helping me produce more videos like this, and getting access to more free content, then or more content, then please do check out my Patreon page, patreon.com/InDeepGeek. So thank you all. Not too far away from the finale. We will find out soon quite how many of our theories are wrong, and if any of them are right. It'll be great to do that. So guys, thank you so much for the chat. Thank you for the super chats. Fantastic bunch of people there in the live chat, and we will see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone. Bye.